Okay, so what happens is those levers push against a piece that, I can't remember exactly how it goes all together. It seems like there's some pins, there are some pins. I can't remember where they are. You remove this cover, it's held on by 3 bolts. And somewhere in there, there's I think two pins that slide in. And there's a piece that you can't see that's covered up, and that piece has little notches in it that line up with those little levers that move like this. And so you put that piece in and you turn it just a little bit so that the levers are lined up away from the notch, where there's a little plate it can push against. And then you put the pins in, and that holds it so that it's in a particular orientation relative to those little levers. And this ring is threaded on the inside. You can see there's holes all around the outside of it, and you can see there's a pin right here. This pin has a little spring that pushes it in that way. This piece right here, well, it's got too much tension on it right now to see how it might move, but this piece, the yellow piece, is separate from this ring. They're touching each other, but they're not the same piece. This piece has holes on the face of it all the way around. This is the pressure plate. So basically what this engages directly with the friction material. So what you've got is you've got the pressure plate, and then where you can see the inside teeth, that is basically just friction material. And then and there's another plate on the other side of it that's made onto this outer ring that these bolts go through. So the teeth of the friction material engage with the teeth on this ring, and so the hopefully I'm saying this right, the shaft is turning through the middle all the time whenever the rig is going, and the bulk of this part of this assembly turns with the shaft, and part of it turns with the sprocket. So the sprocket's got a bearing that's back here, and it turns with the spider, and I can't remember exactly what's what, but basically the point is, I think it's just the hub on the innermost part that's key to the shaft, that turns with the shaft, and everything else sits with the spider and runs on the bearing. And so what you're doing when you engage the clutch is you're making the shaft and the spider and everything else turn together. Everything except for this housing right here on that bearing. It's always sits still. But everything else turns inside of it when you engage the clutch. And so this pin, this little spring-loaded pin, it's engaging one of those holes. And they're about every 3/4 of an inch around that pressure plate. And so if you want to make as the clutch disc wears, you need to periodically tighten this ring. And so what you do is you take pliers or something, and you pull that pin out against the pressure of the spring. And you'll need to take a tie wire like this, wire will work just fine. And you poke there's a hole that goes sideways through that pin. So you pull the pin out, and you just put a short piece of wire through, and then you let go of the pin, and then the pin will be pushed back in and against that wire by the little spring on the inside, but it'll be held out of the holes that it engages in on the on the pressure plate. And if you want to make it tighter, if you took the time the last time that you had it disassembled to put a little grease on your threads, and you cleaned them out real good on the inside of the ring and on the outside of the piece that it threads on, then you'll be happy about it, because if you didn't and it's all rusted together, that ring is hard to turn. But if you cleaned it real good with the wire wheel and you put just a little bit of grease on it so it doesn't rust together, then it's a lot easier to adjust later. And in which case you can just take a small punch or something and a hammer, like a mini sledgehammer, and you can tap it until in a clockwise direction to make it tighter. And you don't need to turn it very far to make it, if you had it adjusted properly the last time and it's worn a little bit, you might need to turn it 1.5 inches or 2 inches, something like that. You wouldn't want to tighten it. Normally, more than about 2 clicks. Now let me just take a minute, step back for the idea of how you should tighten this. Basically what happens is, I've already in the other video talked about how the power comes through, so I won't belabor the point in going through all the path of power. But basically everything is a rigid connection. I say rigid, it's a mechanical connection. There's no torque converter, there's no liquid connection anywhere, there's no like shock absorbing, sacrificial bolt or something like that that's designed to break if you send too much power through, like you would have on a bush hog or something like that. This is, power all the way through. And so the clutch is your opportunity to give you a little forgiveness. So if you're running it at high power and you're drilling, you can't see what's about to be next. And if there happens to be a giant boulder or something in there and you're running it as hard as it'll go, and you hit that boulder hard, then it's not going to want to rip that thing out all at once, and it's going to want to break something. And if you have your clutch adjusted real tight, you might break something. If you adjust that clutch so that when it's snapped in, it's got the ability to slip before the engine bogs down, then that can become your limitation.